I've debated making this video since before the Nocturne video took off, and have just never been able to find the words, but you know what, I'm here now, so why not? The Blast and Infernal segment of Shin Megami Tensei IV is the best thing ever, and none of you can change my mind. For those of you who haven't played Shin Megami Tensei IV, firstly, change that. It's genuinely up there with Digital Devil Saga in my mind for peak SMT. I'd even go so far as to call it one of my favorite video game stories, period. Secondly, maybe don't watch this video if you intend to play the game. But since I'm sure some of you don't care about that, allow me to provide some narrative context. Shin Megami Tensei IV has you play as Flynn, a samurai from the Eastern Kingdom of Mikado, your country's leading military force, which is chiefly tasked with preventing the demons of Naraku, the dungeon their base is built upon, from entering the city proper. After a black-clad woman brings hell on earth into the town, you and your fellow samurai apprentices, Jonathan, Walter, and Isabeau, venture deeper and deeper into Naraku, only to find a post-demonic apocalyptic Tokyo trapped in a dome upon which your nation is built. As you venture forth as strangers in this strange land, you encounter various factions, including the relatively neutral Hunter Society just trying to survive, the Hachiburen-go Ashurakai, a Yakuza group turned authoritarian body offering protection at a price to areas in their influence, and the Ring of Gaia, a cultist faction who has taken the strong will survive and the weak will follow or die, a bit too close to heart. After exploring and getting to know the good, bad, and ugly of all three factions, you are eventually informed by your commander that the Ashurakai have taken another samurai prisoner. In exchange, he requests that you kill the leader of the Ring of Gaia, a woman named Yuriko. While nobody's particularly enthusiastic about working with Taima, they abide his request and venture into Gaian territory. It is here, before reaching Yuriko, that the merry band is cast into the Passage of Ethics, which isn't the segment I'm going to talk about, but I feel like sets up the context of Jonathan and Walter's characters very well. Rather than accost you with demons or cultists, the typical gameplay suddenly shifts into first gear, as faceless voices simply question your group, asking you to go left or right in hallways based upon what you would do given a situation.
You are the ruler of a country. You have called upon your people to gather en masse for a game. Among those who attend, one is extraordinarily tall. What would you do? If you would exclude this person for the sake of fairness, go right.
If you accept that one's height is merely a part of their individuality and include this person, go left.
Walter immediately speaks up, claiming that a man cannot help being tall. It would be unjust to exclude him. However, Jonathan retorts that it would be unsporting to the others for one side to have such a clear advantage. Walter goes left, accepting the man for who he is, while Jonathan goes right, disqualifying him for the good of all. Isabeau abstains, simply choosing to follow you. Second, the voices pose a new scenario.
You are the chief of a village which has lived the same way for 1,000 years. One day, a man visits your village, carrying with him revolutionary technology. This technology would greatly ease your people's lives, but would also do away with their current lifestyle. What would you do?
Go right if you would expel the visitor in order to preserve the lifestyle you have always known.
Go left if you would welcome the visitor in order to adopt his technology for your village.
Jonathan worries about what would become of upending the stability of a culture and causing confusion among the people. Walter, however, retorts that life would be improved if they were to accept the man. One must take risks in order to see progress. Again, Walter goes left and Jonathan goes right. Isabeau abstains once again, though does note that Yuriko may be attempting to drive a wedge between them before fighting them. I explain all this because this shows Jonathan and Walter's characters in full display. Ignoring Flynn because he's basically whatever you make him, your three fellows basically fill out the upper line of your basic D&D alignment chart. Jonathan, Isabeau, and Walter exemplify lawful, neutral, and chaotic good, respectively. And this section shows Walter and Jonathan's characters perfectly. Jonathan believes strongly in the good of the people, and seeks the best for his people for their sake. All of them. While he's not so crass as to ignore the needs of the individual, he does believe the group is most important. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. He also places much stock in tradition. He's not one to seek change for change's sake. If this works, why change it? Why fix what isn't broken? Meanwhile, Walter is more about individual freedom. It is wrong to deny one man his due for the sake of a group. Every man should be entitled to his own. A society that would forsake one man in order to survive is not worth saving. Furthermore, he believes that seeking change for the betterment of society, or even one's own self, is worth it, even should embracing that change be of great risk. He would take that chance if he thought it would lead to positive change. Neither of these outlooks are wrong, and neither are meant to be. Which one you believe is right simply reflects upon you and your values. It does not make the other wrong. Both sides have the best interests of society at heart, and seek its best, though how they go about that is staunchly different. Lawful and chaotic, but still good. And in the end, the game reminds us of how similar law and chaos can truly be. Finally, the voices ask their last question. The love of your life lies in front of you, unconscious, unlikely to ever wake. You've tried all medicines and remedies known, and naught has worked. If you would care for them for the rest of your life, go right. If you would stop treatment and allow them to die naturally, go left. And for the first time, Jonathan and Walter both abstain, unable to reach a decision. This question has nothing to do with either's outlook on the world. It is an entirely personal question, a situation which pertains almost solely to them. And they are of one mind, unable to decide. Law and chaos, yet both the same. My only wish is that Isabeau piped up to make a call, just to make her feel a bit more strong as a character, but whatever. Moving forward, the gang finds Yuriko and discovers that she is also their black samurai they came searching for. As Jonathan prepares to strike, she taunts them, claiming to be working to restore the world to its natural state. Walter stops Jonathan from attacking, somewhat enticed by the world in which any man, regardless of his class of birth, could achieve his dreams without being held back by the traditions of his land. Even now that he is above the class system as a samurai, he still remembers being looked down upon by nobles and seeks a world of individual freedom, regardless of the risks that entails. Yuriko, revealing herself as the demon Lilith, tells them to go to Reverse Hills to see true evil. Despite Jonathan's protest, the gang abides Walter's desire to investigate. And while there, not only do they discover that Taima and his Ashurikai are trying to guarantee this game gets its M rating, but more importantly,
we raise the people we take from the underground cities here, and when the time comes, we harvest their brains. Specifically, their neurotransmitters. We suck them out every day at the scheduled time. That's the stuff we make the food for the demons with. You know, those red pills? That's what this whole human farm is for. Get it?
With people deemed detrimental to society, kidnapped and used as human livestock to make addictive pills for demons.
I keep the demons sweet with red pills for the sake of everyone living in Tokyo. We give demons food, the red pills, and they promise not to eat humans. It's a reasonable system, wouldn't you say?
It establishes order and protects the many at the expense of the few. Eventually, they're caught and thrown out, with Taima reminding them who their target is. While Jonathan is loath to side with Taima, he still finds killing Lilith to be their best course of immediate action, whereas Walter begins to doubt whether or not that's truly best. But before they can make a call any which way, they are resummoned to their homeland as the Archangels declare that they are assuming direct control of Mikado's government, planning to separate Tokyo and Mikado once more. In fact, they've already cast out any whom God found unworthy into Naraku and Tokyo. They also reaffirmed that the party's current objective is to kill the Black Samurai before returning to Mikado. The fact that the Archangel state that they've already performed another call is actually something I missed prior to writing this video, as it's something Jonathan actually entirely ignores, instead steeled by the confirmation of their task. Walter, however, refuses, likening the Archangel's vision of Mikado to Taima's vision of Tokyo, building a peace on the backs of those not seen as worth saving.
Both are ruled over by revolting dictators who care for nothing but themselves.
Walter resolves to see the world change to one the strong can shape as they please. Jonathan resolves to see to it that the world is not plunged into chaos and to restore order, despite what that means for Tokyo. All the while, Isabeau simply worries for their comrades in Tokyo, believing that they will attempt to enter Mikado only to be killed. It is here we really start to see the faults in our characters. Jonathan, adverse to change and seeking to preserve the status quo, chooses to side with the Angels, despite the massive cull of his own people they just did, and them threatening to kill innocents seeking sanctuary, in order to maintain a sense of order. Meanwhile, Walter is full aware of what a world where the physically strong can assert their will unopposed would look like. He's seen its aftermath, Tokyo. And yet he wishes to double down on that, to allow that regression, because he believes the society that is forming, both above and below the dome, is worse. Both know the harm they might cause, but accept that risk. While both still have the best interests of Tokyo and Mikado at heart, in their own ways, you can't deny that both are overlooking a lot of injustices to suit their worldviews. Both begin their fall from grace here, and it is punctuated at the point where you walk into Lilith's chamber for the first time. It is here that you are given a choice to accompany Walter or Jonathan upon their respective missions, with Isabeau choosing to stay behind either way. Siding with Walter sees you and him go to Lilith, who instructs you to activate the Yamato Perpetual Reactor within Camp Ichigaya, allowing demons to flood into Tokyo and force change upon the world. Thus, you carve your way through Tayama's forces, dismantling them and their demons one by one, finally giving Tayama what he deserves, before activating the reactor in a flash of white. Siding with Jonathan has you kill Lilith, only for her to gloat that she already sent Walter to do what I just said. By the time you get there, Walter has already arrived, killing Tayama and his demon before activating the reactor himself, again in a flash of white. It is here that the game's third act, the Blasted Infernal segment, truly begins, and that might have been a bit too much preamble, sorry guys. Fading into view from the white void are 4 figures, all who resemble weird monochromatic versions of people you know. Hope, your samurai commander, Hugo, who handed missions down from Mikado's church, Isabeau, your friend and companion, and Isakar, your friend from before you were a samurai, who taken by Lilith's temptations turned demonic and had to be slain. After they speak, a ruined counter-demon force base fades into view, and you are greeted by Walter and Jonathan. Kind of. Depending on who you chose to accompany, one of them will seem strange, as no matter who you sided with, both claim they were just with you. You entered this room with Walter from his path and Jonathan from his. Both argue about what just happened, as both recall being by your side prior to the activation of the reactor, but nobody can agree. You all individually decide to look around outside, as you see the room looking notably a bit dustier. The terminal is also closed. As you exit to Kasumigaseki, you walk outside to see...
What in the devil? The city is gone. We stepped outside to find this. What's happened to Lilith? To Tokyo? The layer of bedrock that covered Tokyo is gone. Our homeland. What has become of the Eastern Kingdom of Mikado? We're in Tokyo, yes? Is this place truly Tokyo?
Both of your friends are devastated. Tokyo is in ruins, and the dome is nowhere to be seen. Depending on how you got here, you're likely thinking that either Walter just destroyed all of Tokyo and Mikado, or that you did. Regardless, the land is now an undefinable desert, and the city as you knew it, along with your homeland, is gone. Moving forward, while none among the party know what this looks like, you, the player, see that the map you are on unmistakably looks like a crater. One which you might see in some place like Nevada, or somewhere where they dropped or tested bombs. Entering one of the nearby remains of a building, you find yourself in one of Tokyo's many undergrounds, though the people there regard you strangely. They believe you to be the henchman of someone named Pluto, until they notice the gauntlets you use to summon demons upon your wrists, though they call them demonicas. Once this crazy dude with crosses all over his body comes in and notices that you do in fact have demon summoning programs, he bids that you be treated as honored guests and released before running off to tell Akira. And as you follow him... Okay, this has nothing to do with my overall point, but I need to say it anyway. Unless you have gotten into a battle, this is the first real time you've heard any new music. Everything else has just been the sounds of desolation or complete silence. And after a man clad in naught but robes and adorned with crosses comes to you and releases you from your strange prison, you hear a gentle theme. To some, maybe familiar. Calm, welcoming, as though the answer to your prayers has arrived, yet the smoldering of fires beneath, the rough movement of machinery. And if you know what song this is, the melody is wrong. For those not in the know, this is a variation of the law theme used in the majority of Shin Megami Tensei games, with only a few exceptions. And here it sounds hopeful, but like something isn't right. Like the music is trying to tell you that not is all as it seems. As you walk in, you meet this Akira, a man clad in garb that would befit a Fallout game more than this one, with a deep scar underneath his right eye. As this Kiyoharu tells him that he believes God has sent you to defeat Pluto the Tormentor. Akira tells you that he had a very similar dream to what you had, but was instead told that warriors from another world would come and awoke holding the remote to the Yamato Perpetual Reactor. He offers you the remote in trade for doing what Kiyoharu believes you were sent here to do: defeat Pluto the Tormentor and stop his poison. On the way out, a family stops you, giving you a side quest to go to Shibuya and slay a demon there who turned their family into more demons. While Walter believes it would be better to forget the dead rather than wallow in sadness, Jonathan counters that while they can't help the dead, they can help those the dead left behind. Walter relents, saying that he'll follow you to Shibuya if you so choose. And you can choose one way or the other. The game does not penalize you for ignoring this quest. But at this moment that helps this feel like a world. Just like the feeling of walking into your own Tokyo for the first time. That feeling of walking into a new and unfamiliar land. It all hits again here. This is a place. These are people. And while at the very least we know that Walter or ourselves didn't blow up the entire planet, it's still a lot to take in, and you're likely asking yourself a lot of questions. How did we get here? What happened to this Tokyo? Why is this Pluto poisoning everyone? Well, let's put a pin in those things for now. Right now, we have a Pluto to kill. As we arrive at Pluto Castle, we see strange alien shapes, populated largely by robots dubbed Pluto soldiers, copies of the true Pluto made to act as grunts. Laying waste to them, Walter comments that he's unsure whether this Pluto is truly human, to which Jonathan agrees, and sure enough, atop the castle,
We meet at last. That's Pluto the Tormentor.
nothing but a mindless machine. As Pluto stirs to life, it begins to parrot robotic phrases.
You are not the Lord's chosen. You are not the Lord's chosen.
Oh, it speaks?
Obliterate, obliterate, in the Lord's name.
It speaks, but it does not converse. It is merely parroting words at us.
We shall exterminate filth. We shall exterminate filth. Die, filthy ones.
Note the use of the same word as the Archangels. Whatever this world is, if this Lord ain't our Lord, he's damn close. The entire time the fight goes on, Pluto continues to spout robotic pre-programmed phrases.
Stop. Your actions are sins. Sins must be punished. Sins must be punished.
But that's when Pluto drops the bomb.
Think on this. Think on this. My purpose here. In other words, the will of the Lord.
You don't mean God was the one who spread this poison throughout Tokyo? Is this God's will?
I'll not bother thinking on this. It isn't worth my time. God or not, he scorns humans too much. I'll destroy his will along with this abomination.
This shows exactly the Lord's intentions. The people who don't fit God's plan were killed, bombed, poisoned, murdered however possible by placing machines of death upon the world to finish what the bombs and poison couldn't. One thing that I like is how Jonathan, despite being willing to damn Tokyo earlier for the sake of Mikado, still shows joy over being able to save this Tokyo from the poison, even in full knowledge that said poison is God's will. It shows that Jonathan has not yet lost all the goodness in him yet. Yes, he still forsook his Tokyo for the sake of his own land rather than embrace change, but this is not his Tokyo, it's not his land, it might not even be his god. In this situation, bereft of all personal attachment, Jonathan is able to make a distinctly chaotic decision fighting the will of God without betraying his moral code. Upon returning, Jonathan questions whether Akira is certain if it's okay to give them the remote, as what they're going to do will cause demons to flood into Tokyo again. But Akira is resolute, as he discusses his plans to eschew tradition and take control of the demons that come in, putting them to use in rebuilding their lives. Another might-be familiar theme creeps in, the theme of chaos from Shin Megami Tensei II, but given a newfound sense of hope. A society fighting against unjust law, bent on taking what they believe they are owed. Inherently chaotic, but obviously good. Akira mentions how he intends to name the city the Eastern Kingdom of Mikado, in honor of them, to which Jonathan, smiling, remarks that that would make him King Akira of the Eastern Kingdom of Mikado, the same name as their founding king. Remember how I mentioned that you might wonder what put this Tokyo in this state? It's time to take that pin out. It's elaborated more in the game's DLCs, but 25 years before the events of the main story, God took control of intercontinental ballistic missiles and fired them around the world, causing the destruction of the world just as he does in Shin Megami Tensei I. In our timeline, Flynn's previous incarnation fused with Tokyo's guardian deity, Masakado, and together they formed the dome that covered Tokyo, protecting it from God's will. It is upon this dome that the kingdom of Mikado would be built, and due to a time dilation caused by means unclear, 1,500 years passed in what was only 25 beneath the surface. One day beneath was 60 above. This created the world as we see it at the start of the game. However, this was not what happened in every world. Similar to how we accompanied Jonathan and Walter from their respective routes, Blasted Tokyo exists in a timeline where Flynn's previous incarnation was either unable or unwilling to do as he did. As such, the ICBM struck Tokyo, turning it into the cratered landscape we saw. Of course, humanity is ever resilient, hiding within the undergrounds of Tokyo. Not one to let humans deemed unworthy live, God placed Pluto upon the land, a mindless automaton with one purpose: kill. By drone or poison, wipe out every last living soul remaining in Tokyo. And it is in this state that the world will remain for 25 years. We didn't go backwards in time, we simply went to the left a bit. And in a world of unbridled corrupt law, what is needed to set things right is a hand willing to bear the torch of peace, one that will spark a chaotic flame to burn away what was, and upon its ashes, build something new. But if this is us going left a bit, what if we went right? After another quick discussion with the same 4 white figures from before, we awaken again in the CDF base, again destroyed, but differently this time. A bizarre green man enters the room asking who we are, but leaves shouting for Akira when he sees our demon summoning gauntlets. Going to meet with him, we see a bizarre looking half-demon man with what resembles a scar upon the skin beneath his right eye. He speaks in strange terms, calling us intruders and asking us to help him defeat someone named Kenji, who he says is the king of Tokyo. After a bit of talking, the gang eventually pries out of him what's going on. This King Kenji received a dream from the same white figures, who told him,
"When the intruders touch the remote, Kenji's gonna die."
Thus, Kenji would kill our group on sight. This Akira wants Kenji dead so he can become the king of Tokyo, so since we have a common enemy, we join forces with this demonic Akira and move into Infernal Tokyo proper.
Gracious!
It seems unstable.
Always hilarious to see a country boy reacting to the big city for the first time.
Yeah, for those who haven't put it together, in this Tokyo, Flynn's previous incarnation, along with this Kenji, managed to stop God from firing the ICBMs in the first place. They used demons to defeat God's armies, with Flynn's incarnation dying in the process, and Kenji taking over and instating order. The humans that remained were given a choice: either fuse with demons to become demonoids, or remain human and act as nourishers, people in rags with plugs in their heads in order for demons to feed on their neurotransmitters. A situation not unlike Tayama's red pills. Despite the obvious lack of freedom involved, some humans even like this situation, as the demons can't kill them off, lest they starve to death. As Jonathan and Walter are stunned by the ensuing fires and chaos around them, Akira explains that this is Tokyo now, a land governed only by the rule of the strong. While Walter initially seemed worried over the state of the world, he does come down, commenting that this rule is nice and simple. Jonathan points out that Akira seems to be using them to extend his own influence, a claim Demi Akira doesn't even try to refute. But we later see exactly where Akira stands on the totem pole. Coming to Infernal Shinjuku, a Vitala who seems to know Akira greets him, demanding what seems to be a fairly typical payment. Only this time, the demon demands he pass it to him using his teeth. Walter asserts that, as future conqueror of the city, why should he allow himself to be condescended to that way? And that he should grow a pair and say, "I'm here to take Shinjuku." A claim to Vitala absolutely hears. Akira, conceding the non-violent bitch baby approach, sheepishly declares his authority from behind his new big strong samurai friends, his bravado only returning after the demon is dead. He seems to get a bit more resolve as you go to fight Mahamayuri in Shinjuku, though he still talks from behind you. After taking Shinjuku in his name, Walter does seem to celebrate his victory with Demi-Aki, though the mood does get a bit more somber when Akira mentions he had the same dream of the white as you did, and that he knows you intend to eventually leave. Jonathan asserts that they are bound to do what is right for their homeland, even if that will make things harder for Akira. Meanwhile, Walter, with a casual air, declares that this world seems fine. Might makes right. The simplicity is appealing. Despite all the death and human slavery. This is something I personally find super interesting and that I don't think I've seen anyone talk about. Walter is willing to accept and even validate the exact same practices he condemned in his own world, simply because here they are the will of someone stronger than everyone else, that being Kenji. Institutionalized classism, where people born a certain way are seen as inferior and prevented from rising up by those seen as greater. People seen as weaker or less worthy are kept down by those in power. In this world, humans don't have freedom. Even weaker demonoids like Akira don't have freedom. Their freedom ends at where the person above them says it does. Just like how the casual race freedoms ended where the luxurious said, "Yeah, sure, they can try to take control for themselves, but the same could be said of law. And if you try to revolt, you will be put down." That's basically what Walter is trying to do. He's trying to revolt. The only difference is he's strong enough not to be put down. The only difference between this world and his own is how the leader is trying to assert themselves. God asserts his will because he is the leader. That's the way it's always been. Kenji asserts his will because he's the strongest one in the proverbial room. Beyond that, there's little difference between Kenji, God, or even Tayama when you break it down. I mean, shit, this world even has institutionalized brain eating for demons. I mean, what do you think Nourisher meant? Anyway, the last major moment we have with this Akira comes when we reach Infernal Camp Ichigaya. Jonathan inquires as to what Akira's plans are when he becomes king, and he, almost embarrassed, confides that he wants to create a world where everyone is equal. Walter just brazenly asks if treating the strong and the weak alike would be true equality, and looks to you for validation. And who gets the top tier line here depends upon whether you agree or disagree.
You have my respect for your stance. Your concern for the well-being of the people over your own selfishness is the mark of a true king. I wish you the best, King Akira.
I can't say I agree. But every man is entitled to his own opinion. You're staking your own life for the benefit of others, yes? Then you'll need to be stronger, King Akira.
Both validate Akira in their own alignment-coded way. It's just that where Jonathan feels like he's still got some goodness in him, Walter feels like he's much more gone off the deep end, and... Okay, if I'm gonna gush about this ending, I should also air my negatives, and this is probably my only major one. At this point in the story, Walter's motivations have shifted drastically. He's willing to excuse everything that motivated his rebellion against the order of society, just because all that stuff is now being imposed by someone who aligns with his new worldview. Jonathan has also shifted, yes, but he wasn't so bold as to look blasted Akira in the face and say he was making a bad call. While Walter being at this stage is not bad in and of itself, my issue is that it no longer feels like he's paralleling Jonathan. At no point does Jonathan act like what blasted Tokyo needed wasn't a bit of chaos. In fact, he seems surprised and appalled that Pluto poisoning the land and its people was God's will, and celebrated his victory over the will of God.
I am glad to have freed Akira and his people from the poison. A very bold plan. Sir Kiyoharu is a tad bit unique, so I think it would be better if you were to lead.
That is what he says to blasted Akira's declaration that he intends to allow demons to flood Tokyo with the intent to put them to use. This is an inherently chaotic action, but knowing that the alternative is death en masse at the hands of holy automatons, Jonathan can see the forest for the trees enough to know that law is not what this world needs. Walter, meanwhile, walks into Infernal Tokyo and goes, "Good God, who called havoc up in here?" Until he's told that this was the will of people strong enough to trash whatever they wanted and kill anyone who tried to stop them. At which point he goes, "Oh, okay, that sounds neat," even as he figures out exactly what that entails. Walter sees a world in desperate need of some law in order to pull itself out of a state of stagnation, something that he has in the past claimed to want to avoid, and ignores that because it doesn't suit him. This is an easy problem to fix in my opinion. The obvious answer is to simply have Walter peel back a bit, have him realize that true freedom cannot be found in this world, where oppression is law imposed by the strong upon the weak. To quote another game with some really great law and chaos routes, in this world, humans will get wiped out no matter what, whether that means literally by killing them or figuratively by turning them all into livestock. There's no possibility in that world at all, no freedom. Not everyone can live on strength alone. That way, when Jonathan and Walter both commit into fusing into their respective final bosses, they can better rationalize the decision by going, "Yeah, that world was bad, but you saw the other one. That was way worse." Alternatively, and this might have been even more cool to see, Jonathan could be the one to change. After the Pluto fight, have him try to rationalize Pluto being there. Then upon returning to Kiyoharu, give his line about Akira leading to Walter instead, and maybe have Jonathan voice a degree of concern about letting demons flood the land. That would better show Jonathan's transition to Merkaba's way of thinking, and allow him to parallel Walter's transition to Lucifer's. I still think this section is amazing, and they still parallel each other enough that the game gets across what it's trying to do. But this was one thing they could have improved upon. Regardless, before we go, we have one more thing to do. Upon arriving at the Yamato Perpetual Reactor, we finally meet King Kenji, who challenges us to a fight over the remote. Kenji initially seems like he'd almost rather not fight, simply resigning himself to doing what he believes he is fated to do, though he eventually loses himself in the bloodlust.
I was afraid this would happen. I told you so. There's no rush like fighting. Let me fight more. Power is everything. Fighting is my life.
He even attempts to feign an early death to gain an advantage, an act which both Walter and Jonathan condemn. And with that, Infernal Tokyo belongs to Akira, and we take our leave. This segment of the game takes the stranger in a strange land feeling and turns it up to 11. It kind of feels like a couple of D&D one-shots where everyone just played their characters from a main campaign and accidentally learned more about their characters than they expected. And yet, if we cut this segment, every ending would feel like it came out of nowhere. This segment of the game is absolutely necessary for the characters to get where they need to be for the end game, and it's great. Putting characters in a situation where nothing they do pertains to the main world they actually care about can be one of the best ways to get a sense for that character as a person. Who is this person? What truly matters to them? What drives them? and when given the opportunity to learn and change in what amounts to a control environment, do those things change? This segment is 100% necessary to get everyone where they need to be for the purposes of the finale, regardless of your ending. For Jonathan to destroy Tokyo with a concentrated black hole to maintain what Mikado has been, for Walter to forsake humanity for a world shaped for better or worse by the physically strong, both needed this segment in order to get there. And acting as observers upon it all are the white figures who sent us there, who guided you to these worlds in the first place, who now make their point known. Even if you choose to preserve the status quo of the world, sever Tokyo from Mikado, if that world ever doesn't align with God's will, he will destroy it. Even if you choose to tear up the rug from the world, shunning the status quo in favor of change, the world will destroy itself in the end. No matter what, humanity is doomed to be destroyed, whether by its own hand or someone else's. Then they ask, what you intend to do. Will you preserve the status quo? Or will you destroy the order of things? Or, agreeing in their belief that humanity is doomed no matter what they choose, will you destroy the Yamato Perpetual Reactor, letting it run amok and devour reality in a black hole, giving humanity perhaps the only true peace it could ever know? Or perhaps, will you find your own way?